Coming up, Georgia's #1 again, and some Alabama fans don't like it. Plus, one analyst shows a lot of love to Auburn. We'll talk about it all next right here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Man, do I love this time of year. Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Adams. That's Mike Johnson, the former Alabama All-American, and this is AT&T SEC Country Live, where we look ahead to this Saturday's game, but also look back on last night's college football playoff top 25 rankings, and there's nothing I love more than a good college football debate, and these rankings, even early in the process here, these rankings certainly set us up for a great debate.
Don't you feel like this weekend is the weekend we've been talking about for like 2 months? Like I feel like it's taken us forever to get to this second weekend in November, and now we're finally in this home stretch and seeing these last quarter of games on these schedules. I think it's going to be a fun week for sure.
And you're probably like me, and I got Georgia Auburn on Saturday. You got Alabama Mississippi State. There's an element of, hey, I'm focused in on the game that I'm covering for the Dogs, but also want to make sure you get a chance to see some of those other ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely going to be on the couch when Georgia and Auburn face off. I think a lot of Alabama fans will be as well.
All right, we'll talk a lot about that here today on AT&T's SEC Country Live. And a reminder that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Let's dive in with the big news around the SEC today with item number 1 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And let me start with this. So rankings come out last night. Georgia on top of the rankings once again, #1 in the poll. Alabama, the other undefeated team from the SEC, coming in at #2. And listen, there are some Alabama fans who say that's exactly the way we want it. We're going to take the same page that Nick Saban's been on of that's rat poison. We don't need to worry about that. We don't need to focus in on that. Some Alabama fans, though, saying, hey, listen, there's a resume that was built because of the win against LSU, and maybe we should have gotten some love. SECCountry.com did a story about this. I'll show you some of the tweets, or at least one of the tweets they captured that kind of gives you an idea of what some Alabama fans are saying on this, essentially laughing at the idea that Georgia be ranked ahead. Definitely a big LOL that Alabama is sitting behind Georgia. I mean, you watched the rankings last night. We talked about them on our own show. Is it an LOL for you that UGA is ranked ahead of Alabama?
I'm not even sure where you found the tweet. I mean, I'm not even sure this Jeremy Pond guy is not just a Florida fan that's laughing that Georgia is ranked #1 over the top of Alabama. I haven't run into really any Alabama fans that feel that way. I know they're out there because I just know how that sort of thing works. You're always going to get a small portion of the fan base that feels a little bit differently than some of the other guys do. But for everybody I talk to that I know that's in and around program that watches Alabama on a weekly basis, they feel very content with where they're at. I think a lot of Alabama fans are fine having Georgia kind of be that torchbearer right now for the SEC, kind of carry that burden, that load of being a #1 team. Alabama just has to continue to winning, just like Georgia does if they want to be where they want to be at the end of the year. I don't have a problem with Georgia being #1. They've looked good. They have the resume to be there. I love the way they've built that team. I love what Kirby Smart has done. They've kind of built from the trenches out, which I think kind of really signals a championship level team. I think a lot of Alabama people that I've talked to really respect that. They respect Kirby Smart, and they respect what's going on in the Eastern Division at Georgia.
So why is it right now that Georgia is at #1, Alabama #2? Well, Kirby Hocutt, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee chairman on ESPN last night, spoke about what gives the Dogs the nod over the Tide for the moment. Take a listen.
We spent time on #1 Georgia, #2 Alabama. Good test for Georgia against South Carolina. Probably a little better test for Alabama against LSU this week. I would say the margin of separation continues to be close. The difference goes to Georgia because of the win at Notre Dame. So that's a big difference to the selection committee between 1 Georgia, 2 Alabama at this time.
So interesting stuff there in terms of what Kirby Hocutt has to say, that is the difference, the fact that Georgia goes on the road, beats Notre Dame, that right now Alabama doesn't have that, even though Alabama beat a ranked LSU team on Saturday.
Yeah, I don't think I would have complained either way. And listen, I know that you look at what Alabama has done recently, look at the last few years, look at the last 10 years really under Nick Saban, and you can make the argument that maybe they should be given the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they should be #1. But I look at this as just strictly 2017. As good as this Alabama team is, I don't know that this is Nick Saban's best team. I don't even know that it's in his top 5 teams. And when you add the injuries at the linebacker position, I can see this team struggling down the stretch. I understand they're very good. They have a very good running game, very good front seven as always. Anytime Nick Saban and Jeremy Pruitt are controlling your defense, you have a very good chance to win. But I don't think this is as strong a team and a defense as this has been for the last few years. And if they want to give the nod to Georgia and put them in the #1 slot because they do have a lot of good players and haven't had a ton of injuries, then I'm perfectly okay with it. Like I said, all these teams need to do is continue to win, and everything will fall into place. Georgia right now, let them be number one. Let them kind of carry that torch right now for a lot of these SEC teams.
Let me get some of the comments from the comment section here. Who says, Nancy Hedrick says, what difference does it make if they're number one or number two? They will win no matter what their ranking is going to be. Jeffrey Dotson says, does it matter? They'll settle it in the 1st of December. Here's the thing about what may happen, though, in the 1st of December. You know, what the rankings may matter for right now is that if the SEC makes an attempt to get 2 teams in the college football playoff, there's going to be some debate that Georgia, were to lose to Alabama, has a better chance of going in as a second SEC team than Alabama would as a loser, because right now the thing that makes Alabama number 2 may keep it out of the playoff if it's the SEC runner-up.
Right, and I agree with you. And obviously, you know what? If they lose to Georgia, they do lose to Auburn, or lose to Mississippi State this weekend, then Alabama didn't deserve to be there in the first place. I think that's the argument that a lot of the College Football Playoff Committee will make. I think the one issue, if I had to pick out one issue that I had with the College Football Playoff Committee, it's the fact that they're not really valuing at all the Florida State victory, because Florida State has tanked since Alabama played them. But that was a different Florida State team in week 1. They had DeAndre Francois for most of the game. I think a lot of those players have laid down since, because they have looked bad on offense and they have taken a couple of losses. But I still think Alabama deserves a little bit of credit for beating the number 3 team in the country at a neutral site game to open the season. I don't think they get any credit for that, and I'm not sure that's really, really fair.
We'll keep your comments coming on the SEC Country live comment section there. Keep those rolling in. Georgia fans, Alabama fans have a chance to weigh in on that. But the Dogs and the Crimson Tide, not the only big movers from the SEC last night. Obviously, they stay at the top, but a team that joins both those in the top 10 is Auburn. We'll make them the subject of item number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And not only is Auburn at number 10, despite the fact they've got 2 losses, there is still some thought that the Tigers are a college football playoff contender here, a team that to some degree controls its own destiny. In fact, one analyst around the table for ESPN last night thinks that Auburn actually fares favorably to an undefeated team right now. Booger McFarland says Auburn's better than Wisconsin. He said that on TV last night. I don't disagree with this, but is this the kind of thing that you think the rest of the country probably raised an eyebrow at? The fact that a 2-loss SEC team getting shown love over what would appear to be the Big Ten's best chance of getting a college football playoff representative here in 2017.
Yeah, I can already hear the social media posts. Oh, you know, ESPN loves the SEC. Booger McFarland's from the SEC. These guys are going to favor the SEC. The fact of the matter is, if Auburn lined up on the field with Wisconsin right now, they would beat the crap out of Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin's best wins are over Northwestern by 11 points and Purdue by 8. They haven't played anybody that's even close to being the team that Clemson is, that Auburn lost to. They haven't even played anybody that's close to the team that LSU is, which is another team Auburn lost to. And so I think what Booger McFarland said is very fair, that you have to keep Auburn up there because of the quality of the losses they have had. They definitely, you know, they still have a path. They're going to be able to prove themselves this weekend if they want to be in that fight. But Wisconsin right now, I don't think you can make the argument that they really belong even near the top 4 because of the schedule they've played. And I know that's the argument you're going to hear a ton going into this college football playoff. If they do find a way to make it through these Big Ten games and get into that Big Ten championship and try to beat a Penn State, Ohio State team, then maybe we can start talking about that argument. But for right now, there is nothing on Wisconsin's schedule that signals to me. It's not even the opponents, but it's the ability to really beat them handily. They haven't even done that.
Wolf Walton says Bama and Auburn will play more ranked teams in the next 3 weeks than Wisconsin's played all season. #fact. And I don't disagree with Wolf on that. I don't disagree with what you said either. To me, the most overrated thing in college football is the notion of being undefeated. You can schedule your way to an undefeated season. And that's not what Wisconsin's necessarily done. They've gotten some bad breaks by some of the Big Ten West teams on their schedule. But nonetheless, undefeated is more of a measurement of who you played as opposed to how good you are. In the case of Auburn, I have no problem believing you that Auburn is way better than Wisconsin, even if it's got the 2 losses.
Yeah, to me, Wisconsin, it's smoke and mirrors. You know, you've seen what you're doing. And listen, I know that there's been problems with what people say about Alabama's schedule. And I know that, you know, maybe they haven't played as strong a schedule they have in the past, but Alabama's been beating teams by 30 and 40 points. Wisconsin's by beating teams by 8 points, 9 points, 11 points, teams that aren't even good. And so I think you can look at that, and it's kind of comparable to what Miami has done, although I think Miami has played a little bit tougher schedule than what even Wisconsin has. Both of them are going to get a chance to prove themselves. I don't think they'll be able to get it done. Like I said, I think if you lined Auburn up on the field with Wisconsin right now, I don't even think the game's close. I think Auburn wins by 3 touchdowns.
David out in the comment section disagrees. He says Auburn better than Wisconsin? Absolutely not. And what I find to be interesting about that is, and this has been true, you know, going back to the offseason, anytime this subject comes up, the non-Auburn fans in our comment section are harder on Auburn than virtually any other fan base.
Definitely harder than me and you are on Auburn.
Yeah, without a doubt. I thought Auburn, at the start of the season was a good team. I picked them to win the West. You've been high on Auburn here as well, at least impressed with some of what they've done. But they get zero benefit of the doubt. I don't know if it's just Alabama fans or if it's Alabama, Georgia, LSU, everybody else. But it's so funny to me that Auburn gets zero benefit of the doubt from the other people in our comment section. I find that to be fascinating.
Well, and I think one of the things that kind of leads to that is really when Jarrett Stidham took over the helm and you thought, man, Jarrett Stidham and Chip Lindsey and Gus Malzahn, when all these things come together, Kerryon Johnson, Cam Petway, they're going to have video game-like numbers on offense. And it just hasn't panned out that way. You haven't seen the Big 12 video game-type numbers out of Jarrett Stidham that you thought there was a chance you might be able to get. And so I think when people look at it, some of the deficiencies you have had out of Jarrett Stidham, specifically that Clemson game when all the lights were on you, when you were in Death Valley in that big Week 2 game, you weren't able to get it done. And so I think a lot of people look at Auburn and say, you know what, they've had their chance to get it done on a national stage and didn't do it. And they also folded in the second half under LSU. And I think that's where a lot of that kind of resentment comes from.
Steve Weaver in the comment section says the reason why everybody's so hard on Auburn is because everybody hates Auburn. Response to that, though, from Zachary Minton, who says they hate us because they ain't us. # War Eagle. So the Auburn fans kind of coming out of the woodworks here, feeling pretty good about their team. But maybe that's the case. Maybe people are so hard on Auburn because they are a big rival to Georgia, big rival to Alabama, big rival to LSU. Maybe that's just enough of a cross-section of the rivals here. Maybe that's what's going on.
Well, and also, I think it's really what a lot of people on the national scene think of Gus Malzahn as a big game coach. I think that he doesn't get the benefit of the doubt when you put him on that national stage against teams that have been there, teams from the Big Ten, teams from all over the country that have been there. A lot of times they don't, the people I talk to don't think Gus Malzahn really matches up to those national elite level coaches, and we're going to find out really soon this weekend.
All right, we've been on the air for like 10 minutes. Would you mind if we do some coaching rumors now? that's as long as I can wait.
I had to hold him back for 10 minutes.
Listen, that's as long as I can wait. I'll talk about the playoffs and stuff like that, but what I'm really here for is to get into some juicy rumor mongering. Can we do that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's have it.
Item number 3 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Stephen Godfrey, SBNation.com. With a bit of a report about the way that Tennessee may be looking to move with its next head coach. Obviously, it's a foregone conclusion, at least in many minds, that Butch Jones is not going to be back next year. Well, Godfrey shed some light on who might potentially be a replacement for him there at Tennessee. Here's what Godfrey wrote at SB Nation as far as the replacement goes. They're treating other schools, coaches, agents, treating Tennessee like it's an open job. Mississippi State coach Dan Mullen, most frequently discussed name. That isn't John Gruden, Godfrey writes. Multiple coaching sources confirm Mullen would be a fit with the new athletic director, John Curry. So that's Stephen Godfrey saying that, hey, Mullen may be a guy that Tennessee would target. Does that make some sense to you?
I don't know if it makes much sense to me. I don't like the fit either way when you look at Dan Mullen. And obviously, and I know that I've gotten from you on this, I think you've been a little bit higher on Dan Mullen than I have. I mean, this is a guy who had a 5-1 season to get into a bowl game last year. I don't know if this is a slam dunk hire that a lot of people make him out to be, but he has been successful and is the most successful coach in Mississippi State history. I think he's 68-44 now, if I'm not mistaken, when you look at what he's done at Mississippi State. And he has had a long tenure there. And he continues to do things at a high level, and he's ranked number 16 right now. But when I look at some of the games where he's played down to opponents, that's where I ask questions about Dan Mullen. Last week when you're playing UMass, last season against South Alabama, some of the other stinkers you've thrown up there if you're Dan Mullen at Mississippi State. I want a coach that's a little bit more proven than that if I'm at Tennessee. I know that Tennessee right now, you don't feel like they have really their pick of the litter, but Tennessee should expect more of that. They should go after a proven national championship level Power 5 coach in my mind, or Tennessee's not getting their money's worth.
All right, let me defend Mullen. Let me also respond to that. I think we kind of got into this a little bit yesterday. Like, where is this big name coming from?
That's true.
I mean, John Gruden. I think Mullen's a much better hire than John Gruden would be because Mullen's at least done it at the major college level. Now, he hasn't won as much as Tennessee wants to win, but I think part of that's been where Dan Mullen's been working Mississippi State compared to Tennessee, the assumption the Vols would have better resources. So listen, I love the idea of hiring someone better than Dan Mullen. It's sort of like yesterday you said, hey, Texas A&M should hire somebody better than Jimbo Fisher. Like, who are these better candidates? I mean,
I didn't say that yesterday. Did I say that?
Something close to that. We'll rewind the tape back, but something close to that.
I'm just saying that I don't know if he's as good of a name as he was last year with everything that's going on.
That's fair, but in the case of Mullen to Tennessee, I mean, this is about as good as you can do. I mean, if anything, this is sort of an unrealistically high expectation for who you might be able to hire, more so than someone that Tennessee should shoot above the bar on.
I don't know. See, I fall back on kind of what you said yesterday about, I think it was Chip Kelly. This is one of those guys you bring in sometimes when you don't have the talent to really be able to compete with some of the teams you're going to be playing.
And Tennessee doesn't.
And Tennessee might not, but they can definitely get back there. Tennessee is one of those brand name programs that maybe I give a little bit too much benefit of the doubt to, But when I look at their situation, I think of guys like Chris Peterson, maybe even a Mike Leach out there. I've mentioned Bobby Petrino a ton of times. Those are coaches to me that really fit the bill, maybe a little bit more than Dan Mullen does. I don't even know I don't know that's a good marriage.
The problem with Petrino, though, is he was on a motorcycle with a gal that wasn't his wife. And I'm sorry, it's got the neck brace. I mean, that neck brace photo of Bobby Petrino all scuffed up in his face after he had the motorcycle wreck.
Man.
Like, that picture makes him unemployable in the SEC. And I'm not trying to be overly dramatic. I'm being serious.
Well, that might be true.
I don't think you can do that when you got that guy in that neck brace picture.
Well, let me ask you this, though. Let me approach it from this angle. If you're Dan Mullen and you have your pick between Florida and Tennessee, which one are you going to go to?
Well, that's the thing.
And that's kind of what I'm saying. I don't know if this is the right marriage. When you put Dan Mullen up against what needs to be done at Tennessee, what he has done at Mississippi State, I don't know that this is the best combination.
You're going down a road I wanted to go down, but you're doing it in a different way than I would have done. I think the fact that Mullen may consider, and we don't know, I mean, this is what Stephen got from SB Nation reported. We don't know where this is really going, but if Mullen considers Tennessee and does not consider Florida, I believe that's an indictment about what he views the culture around the Florida program, either with Strickland, the AD that he worked for at Mississippi State, or the conditions on the ground that caused Jim McElwain not to be happy there and caused Urban Meyer not to be happy there dating his back far back as 2010. I think Mullen not wanting to go to Florida is a bad look for Florida if he ends up coaching at Tennessee.
I completely agree with you. I think what his wife has already said, and then the rumors that have been out here about him and Scott Strickland and their relationship, it would definitely probably be of a little bit of an indictment. But this is a guy who's been there before. He's been around the program. He's worked with Scott Strickland. So I think that at some point Florida will get a great head coach. I don't know who it's going to be just yet, but I think they'll go after a Mike Norvell or a Scott Frost or a Matt Campbell or somebody else out there, and Florida will land their coach. They won't have any more kickback than they would have from Dan Mullen.
Phil Lowry says Mark Hudspeth to Mississippi State, who I believe is the Louisiana Lafayette coach, and I believe that's the first time that Mark Hudspeth's name has been uttered here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Am I right about that?
Mark Hudspeth, that is definitely a first for this show. That's the first time we've heard that guy's name.
Neo Persona says, BA played that tape from last week of Mullen's wife. I don't think they'll go back from Florida. I mean, that's right, Neo. I mean, think back to what Mullen's wife said on that Mississippi State podcast. We played the audio. I mean, that to me suggests a guy that, and there have been reports out there, they don't want Florida. But if they go to Tennessee, that's a bad look for Florida because I think Mullen would be a much better candidate for Florida than a guy like Scott Frost, who really hasn't proven it all that much yet.
Well, and I will say this about the possibility of Mullen taking over at Florida. I don't know that you take a job and think, man, we're not going to do very well. I think that when you do take a job, like specifically at Florida, Dan Mullen believes in himself enough to think, man, we can go down there and win, and then I'll be the king of the world. I'll be the king of the world as far as Gainesville goes, be able to go anywhere I want to. I don't think you take the job and think, man, if I struggle, I'm going to get booted out of Gainesville. I don't think that's the way he approaches it.
Adam Modzaleski says, dude, Mullen isn't being considered at Florida, so it's not going to be his to turn down. Plus, it's been reported that Mullen's wife hated Gainesville. Last part I agree with. But do you think for a second, and Adam, I appreciate your comment, but do you think for a second that Florida wouldn't consider Mullen? I mean, this is a guy that, has coached up Nick Fitzgerald pretty well. Florida needs a quarterback. This is a guy that turned Dak Prescott into a NFL star with the Dallas Cowboys Rookie of the Year last year. Are you going to tell me that Florida's not considering Dan Mullen right now?
Well, I can see it that way because, look, we've approached this from Dan Mullen's angle. Maybe he doesn't like Scott Strickland, but what if it's the other way around? What if Scott Strickland's like, you know what, I'm the guy that's making this hiring decision, and I don't really have a good relationship with Dan Mullen. I don't want to bring him in to Gainesville right now under my watch. Maybe that's not a road that Scott Strickland wants to go down. And so we've asked questions about it a ton. There's no telling where Dan Mullen ends up right now. But right now, either one of those jobs, to me, it's kind of a coin flip. When you look at Florida and Tennessee, both have a lot of rebuilding to do.
Last comment, I promise, on this, then we'll move on to something else. Chris Sellers says, what about Jeremy Pruitt to either Tennessee or Florida? For me, that's a name that I would consider. Now, I know that Florida's a big job. They've won national championships here. Tennessee's won one as well, but Florida more recently. Maybe Pruitt's not ready for the Florida job yet. When you see the success that Kirby Smart's having at Georgia, I'm going to count Will Muschamp at South Carolina. I think he's doing a good job with that program. Pruitt's cut from the same cloth. I'd give Pruitt a strong look if I was virtually anybody but Florida.
Yeah, I see that, and obviously I think the world of Jeremy Pruitt. It was a guy I was in and around. When I was a sophomore, he was hired out of Hoover High School to come be a defensive analyst at Alabama. So I've seen that guy's rise. I know what kind of talent he has as an assistant coach. A great recruiter, a guy that will one day be a head coach. But I'm not sure this isn't a guy who needs one of those stepping stone jobs to get where it is. I think Kirby Smart's kind of one in a million. When you talk about taking that big job and taking that role over and really running with it, look at what Will Muschamp did in his first stop. He wasn't able to really do anything good at Florida, and I think he needed that experience to be good at South Carolina. I'm not so sure Jeremy Pruitt doesn't need that same thing.
AT&T, proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless Direct TV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. We're great to have you with us here on the program today. Let me move on to item number 4 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And, you know, there have been a lot of stories dating back to the Jim McElwain death threat allegations about what Florida fans may or may not have done. I know Pat Forty at Yahoo Sports sort of unearthed some comments that showed up on Florida quarterback Felipe Frank's Instagram feed, and Luke Del Rio responded to some of that stuff on Twitter. Here's the tweet from Del Rio, the one-time Florida starting quarterback before his injury this season. Del Rio says, "I understand that the few idiots do not speak for the entire Gator Nation." He's talking about the people who commented on Felipe Frank's Instagram. "But if you hear 10 compliments a day and one disgusting comment, what do you remember? Be better, Gator Nation." Then he throws some hashtags, including not just his Instagram, meaning Felipe Frank's Instagram. So my feelings on this are semi-complicated. I want to lay this out, and you tell me if you agree with me on this. And there's a very good chance you may not. I think the media does a bit of a disservice when it magnifies what some people say on Instagram.
Oh, yes.
If you're as famous as Felipe Franks is, and in this region of the country, Felipe Franks is certainly very famous. He's a Florida quarterback. Idiots are going to write things in your Instagram. I don't think there's just any way to avoid that. And I don't think it's Florida fans and boosters are doing it. I think it's the absolute fringe element. It's not a reflection of Florida fans at all. But when Pat Forty does this, story on Yahoo Sports about what people have written on Felipe Frank's Instagram, I think it sort of paints Florida fans as an overly negative light. And Florida folks know, y'all call me a Gator hater all the time. You know that I'm not, the most inclined to defend Florida. But I'm going to defend Florida fans on this. I think it's a bad job for the media to magnify comments on Frank's Instagram. As heinous as they are, you can really do that with any big-time college football player. And so now you've kind of dragged Luke Del Rio in this discussion where it looks like Del Rio's squaring off against his own fans because of something the media did. I think the media's got to be careful giving too much power to morons on social media, because morons on social media we're always going to have with us.
Yeah, listen, I've said it a couple times on Twitter. People think that anonymity gives them power, and I love the fact that Jimbo Fisher a couple of weeks ago called a guy out of the stands for yelling down at his players in the tunnel. I know a lot of people had a problem with it. He's supposed to be the leader of young men, but some people think that if they can hide in the crowd, they can say whatever they want to. And I'm actually going to go one step further. You called them kind of these fringe fans right now down there in Florida, and fringe boosters or whatever you want to call them. I'm not even sure these are Florida fans. I'm not even sure this isn't somebody from Florida State or another school that's just loading up an account and saying, "Man, I'm going to make Florida look really bad. I'm going to go out here and cuss this quarterback out online, and maybe somebody will pick this up." You don't ever know who's making those comments. Anybody in the world can get online. Any 13-year-old in his mom's basement can get online and make a Twitter account or an Instagram account and say whatever they want to Felipe Franks. I'm not even sold they're Florida fans. So I think that's another thing you have to look at in these media outlets and Yahoo and ESPN and some of these other guys that have picked these stories up about these social media posts. You don't know what it's coming from. You don't know who any of these. I mean, this could be an 8-year-old for all we know, and Pat Forty might be reporting on it. You just never know what angle to take.
But you understand where I'm coming from on the fan thing. To me, the definition of a fan is someone who has something invested. It's someone that goes to a game, that's been watching games on TV his entire life. It's got the Gator gear. It's not somebody that just sort of claims Florida on Instagram or Twitter. It doesn't take a whole lot to do that. Right. I believe that a Florida fan that actually spends some time and some money to invest himself in the program or herself in the program, that's not the kind of people who are saying this stuff to Felipe Franks. But when Pat Forty legitimizes it by reporting on it, all of a sudden now you've kind of dragged Luke Del Rio into this. And if Del Rio hears from a national media writer that Florida fans are saying terrible things, well, obviously that's going to offend Del Rio. And so now this sort of drags this Florida negativity into the public consciousness a little more here. I think this is one of those things where if you're a Florida player for right now, and I know I'm not excusing what people write, I'm not. But if you're a Florida player, you just can't take the bait on this right now because Florida needs to sort of ignore negativity just for the next little bit.
I completely agree with you. I think look, when you look at what Luke Del Rio wrote, I think he did a good job saying, you know what, we might hear 10 compliments, but for every 10 of those, if you hear one bad thing, that kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth. And listen, this is a guy, Luke Del Rio, who has been around the block of college football programs. I mean, this guy started out in Alabama, he's been at Oregon State, he's been down in Florida, he's been at one more place if I'm not mistaken. So this is a guy who knows what all about college football fanhood. He also knows about people writing hate mail. I mean, I'm sure his dad has had plenty in his time as a coach. He's been around football his entire life. He knows what fans are like, specifically in the state of Florida. And so I think that Luke Del Rio went about this in the right way. But I would tell him, if I could talk to him, don't put too much investment in what these fans are saying. They're not in that locker room. They're not in those meeting rooms. They don't know what's going on this team. They don't know Felipe Franks. You don't know if this kid, like I said, this could be a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old somewhere on his mom's Instagram account writing whatever.
The one thing that I think you and I are going to disagree on, though, this is my final point on this subject, is, you go back to the Jimbo Fisher thing, the Florida State fan who said something to him from the stands. I mean, I still think there's a place for free speech. I still think there's a place for a Florida State fan who spent his money to be in the stadium to voice some displeasure about what he's seeing on the field. Maybe sometimes that does look like boos. But I'd much rather you boo from the stands than tweet something or write something on Instagram. There's an element of that that's at least a little more personal, and then there's, as opposed to the anonymity that seems to sort of cloak a lot of this stuff on social media.
Well, I think one of my problems is listen, when I played for the Falcons, you could say whatever you want to. You know, we're getting paid money to be on the field. Obviously, the product's not as good as you want it to be. You can boo, you can say whatever you want. These are kids. These are college kids. They're not getting paid for what they're doing. That's where I kind of draw the line. You might have bought a ticket, but guess what? The kids aren't seeing any of that money. So if you want to yell at somebody, yell at the coaches, yell at the administration. Don't yell at those players on the field.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. Coming up in just a moment, we're going to take a look back here at a pretty interesting year in the annals of SEC history. We'll do that coming up. Before that, though, item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So I saw where Arkansas put together a pretty cool video here about excitement about the upcoming game against LSU, and there's a portion of this video that I think leads to a pretty interesting question about the future of Brett Bielema, the Arkansas coach. Take a look at this video and the excitement that's building for what they call the battle for the boot there between Arkansas and LSU, and let's decide where this is heading. Here's a little bit from Arkansas on social media.
Magnificent day here in Baton Rouge, the capital city.
What's in that bag, boy?
The Tigers and the Razorbacks have battled for the boot in the SEC West.
I just wanna rollie with a dapper ranch. I already got some designer to hold on my pants.
So you see the excitement here. Then they're obviously doing the hype video, get the hip hop music. You know, later on they show the trophy, the boot trophy, and clearly this is a big rivalry between these two schools. Used to play on the Friday after Thanksgiving all the time. Now they play on a different day. But I guess the question that leads me to want to ask you is, if Arkansas were to win this game, get this trophy back on their side again, does that save Brett Bielema's job at Arkansas? I mean, is there too much negativity? Do you forgive the Coastal Carolina close win? Do you forgive the collapse against Ole Miss? If Arkansas could beat LSU, does that change some of that kind of stuff?
I don't know if it does. I think that the product and that ship might have already sold when you talk about Arkansas and kind of what they've put out there this year. And Brett Bielema's had plenty of opportunities. It's not somewhere like Jim McElwain where we say, man, he probably hasn't had a chance to really dig in and do what he needs to do and get this program pointed in the right direction. First of all, can we just talk about that music for a second on that video? Man, that is some terrible, terrible music.
Yeah, I don't know that, but I'm also probably not the hip hop.
Well, I'm definitely not either. But it took me 3 or 4 years into college before I even knew Arkansas and LSU was a rivalry. When we approached that game and they were talking about the battle for the boot, I didn't even know that was a rivalry game.
Well, here's what I'll say about Arkansas LSU. And by the way, we got a lot of folks weighing in on this in the comment section. Here's what I'll say about Arkansas LSU and the rivalry they have. It's one of those manufactured rivalries that actually has, I think, kind of turned into one a little bit. Yeah. You know, some of the ones that we've done because of conference realignment haven't exactly stuck the way you want them to. But Arkansas LSU has actually turned out to be a pretty good rivalry.
Yeah, I got to agree with you on that. They have had some good games. I think Arkansas has actually won 2 of the last 3 on this. LSU, I think, going back to when they handed out this trophy, I believe I looked it up and it was 1996. LSU's won the majority of those games, but Arkansas has won 2 of the last 3, so it has been a little bit more of that rivalry game that you talk about. And somebody also mentioned to me earlier that this game used to be played in Shreveport, Louisiana, kind of the halfway point for a lot of the teams. So like I said, it is a manufactured rivalry, but it's one of those that I didn't realize was such a big deal, and I'd love to hear the comments in the comment section from a lot of the LSU fans we hear. Do they consider it a rivalry as well?
Well, I'll weigh in on some of these. Cliff Nelson, obviously a big LSU fan, says Arkansas needs to pipe down. Bo Molinari, who's actually a Texas A&M fan, says, love this rivalry, battle of the boot. Joel Anthony Dean makes a prediction that Bert, he means Brett Bielema, that's his nickname, folks call him Bert. Bert beats LSU, gets another year, and he laughs about that. Dennis Hand says LSU by a landslide. Esteban Esteves says BA, they're not going to win, talking about Arkansas. James Crump says LSU destroying Arkansas. Cliff Nelson says a big if on Arkansas. So some folks weighing in saying what they think is going to happen in this Arkansas LSU game.
Well, and listen, I think that Brett Bielema, for the first couple of years he was at Arkansas, I really thought that he was building something. I thought he was the guy for the program. I really did. And he was building something. He goes 3-9, 7-6, 8-5, and you think, man, this guy's going to get him there. He's really making a lot of noise in the West. He had a couple of close games, specifically against Alabama. A 1-point game a few years ago, 14-13 of them. I think a mixed extra point actually did them in against a number 1 Alabama team. But then 7-6 last year. Now you're 4-5, 1-4 in the SEC. Brett Bielema 11-26 in conference play since he's taken over the job in Arkansas. Just not good enough. And when you really start to compare these two teams, I'm going to have to give the edge to LSU again this weekend.
Sabrina Thomason-Eaton says Arkansas is struggling, but the quarterback's no quitter. Obviously, kind of impressed with what she's seen from the new starter taking over Austin Allen there.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting too. And I don't know if you're going to get Cole Kelly or Austin Allen back this weekend. I think Cole Kelly's questionable, and Austin Allen is coming back off an injury, so we're not really sure what quarterback we're going to see, but I think that you can apply that to both of them. I think both of them have been very tough in the face of not very good offensive line play throughout the season.
One more comment on this. How about this from Shannon Burgess, a big LSU fan, who says the rivalry 100% manufactured. I've never thought of it as that big of a deal. The problem for LSU is they do play a lot of games they obviously have, they care about. Florida every year, which turned into be a big rivalry. Obviously, Alabama-LSU is a game that's a measuring stick in the SEC West. I'm going to count the Auburn rivalry there as well.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. And LSU is one of those interesting teams, too, where they don't really have anybody in state that they point at. So you have to kind of go around and look at Texas A&M and Arkansas and Auburn and some of these states that border LSU and Louisiana to go and get these rivalry games. I feel like you had to manufacture one at some point. But listen, this trophy, 21, 22 years old now, I think it's definitely starting to take hold and people are starting to recognize it.
All right, let's get ready to shift gears here now. We'll talk more about what's happening in 2017 throughout our show, but each and every Wednesday, it's a time for us to look back to the past. We mentioned Auburn a moment ago. Let's go back to a year that was a lot of fun for Auburn fans to certainly think back on and remember. The year is 2013. Auburn won the SEC, came this close to winning the national championship. It's the subject this week of our Tony Chachere's Seasons to Remember.
Tony Chachere's presents Seasons to Remember and a look back at 2013. An unforgettable year for Auburn fans who saw their team, led by first-year coach Gus Malzahn, use two miraculous plays, a tipped touchdown pass versus Georgia and the kick-six return against Alabama, to win the SEC championship and earn a spot in the final BCS title game. Unfortunately, the Tigers came up short against Florida State and have failed to win any of its rivalry matchups with UGA or Alabama since then. That's a trend Auburn hopes to reverse this Saturday against the Bulldogs as the Deep South's oldest rivalry is renewed once again. Elsewhere in the SEC, 2013 was a good year for conference newcomer Missouri, which won the East in just the Tigers' second season in the league. Vanderbilt also has an opportunity to brag about 2013 as Coach James Franklin led the Commodores to a second consecutive 9-win season and a spot in the top 25. Just one of the facts that makes 2013 a season to remember.
And Seasons to Remember here on AT&T SEC Country Live, brought to you by Tony Chachere's. And if you're looking to spice up your next tailgate, look no further than Tony Chachere's, tailgate champion since 1972. Tony Chachere's makes everything taste great. You know, in our comment section, Andrew DeLorme a moment ago was talking about Auburn and Georgia renewing that rivalry again this week. He calls it the biggest game of the weekend. I would agree with that, and for many of the reasons that we were just talking about in our Tony Chachere's Seasons to Remember segment as well. Oof. In fact, that for Auburn, it's a chance to win one of these rivalry games that it has not done since that magical season of 2013.
Yeah, listen, when you talk about that season, you talk about the tip pass, the prayer, and Jordan-Hare, and you talk about the kick-six games and back-to-back matchups in the SEC. I mean, that was as big a miracle season as I've ever seen in the SEC. And that really, to me, kind of is what Gus Malzahn has been hinging his coaching career on since that year. And I think that really a lot of times when Auburn fans do tend to question Gus Malzahn, they fall back to 2013. Hey, this is a head coach that took it to a national title game. But there was a couple fluky games at the end of the year. And obviously, you know, anytime you win a game and you're that close, you deserve to go there. But man, I don't know if they can recreate that magic this year when you talk about the number one and number two team in the country coming down to the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, we talked about this actually on Dog Nation Daily today about Auburn. Obviously, a Georgia podcast that makes sense to be looking ahead to that Auburn game on Saturday. And for Malzahn, who had a kind of a vibe about him in 2013, right? There's a little bit of pizzazz there. It seems like as of late, I don't know if it's just white-knuckled over the thought of losing the Auburn job or what, but he seems like a much more timid version of himself than what you got back in 2013.
I think it's a fair assessment, too. And I talked to you a couple of times this year. I'm not sure that moving away from play calling and moving away from, farther away from the offense is really what you want to see out of Gus Malzahn. He had that little bit of pizzazz. He had the ability to throw some wrinkles in the offense to make decisions from the head coaching position that you haven't seen in recent years. You haven't seen that typical Gus Malzahn ability to reverse pass and flea flickers and do all the crazy things that he used to do. That's what got Auburn to where they were. He continues to kind of remove himself from that role, continues to kind of step back and be the CEO. I don't know if that's what you want as an Auburn fan. I think that's the reason you brought Gus Malzahn in. This is a guy who has a national title ring as an offensive coordinator, yet he's backing off now and becoming more of a CEO type. I'm not sure that's the best role for him.
Item number 6 here in our AT&T SEC Country Life First and 10 list. Kind of an inspiring piece of video from Alabama linebacker Mack Wilson. As you know, Wilson was injured in the game against LSU on Saturday and going to be sidelined now for a while. If Bama does go to the college football playoff, I guess there's a thought that Wilson might be back on the field then, but certainly no regular season game and not available to the Tide if it were to make the SEC championship game. But that's not stopping Wilson from working his way, trying to get back to full strength. I love the line from him, grind, don't stop. How about the jump roping there on the 1 foot with the other foot in a cast there? Now, first of all, I got 2 healthy legs right now, and I'm not planning on doing any jump roping today. Yeah. So Wilson doing this right here is the kind of thing that's going to make me certainly respect that young man even more. And, you know, as a Alabama alumnus yourself, must be nice to see Wilson, as he said, keeping that grind going.
Yeah, you love to see these kids come into a place that don't think that anything is given to them. And I think that's the biggest problem when you talk to the older people that have been around Alabama, people such as myself that did go through the transition of Mike Shula to Nick Saban, that you hope that the people that are coming in don't think, hey, just because we show up and wear the uniform to be able to win games. This is a guy who's obviously hungry for it. I mean, I'm with you. I'm not going to be doing any jump rope anytime soon. Yeah, he's sitting there doing it on 1 foot. He has that 4 to 6 week kind of foot injury, so they definitely could maybe use him back for the playoffs.
But, I mean, unfortunately, the thought of Wilson there with the foot in the cast does bring up kind of a negative topic. Yeah. And we talked about this some this week already. So many injuries to linebackers. Is there a point in which Alabama stops being Alabama at that one position? Because when you think about the greatness of Alabama, whether it be the modern day or dating back to the Derek Thomas of the world, you think about those great linebackers. I mean, does Alabama just have too many injuries to still be as great as it needs to be at the linebacker position?
I don't think they are going to be as great as they have been at linebacker position. I don't think there's any way that you could possibly expect them to be. When you look at the names that have gone down, you also look at Rashaan Evans has battled injuries all year. Minkah Fitzpatrick got dinged up this last week. They are dealing with a lot of injuries, and they lost a lot of last year's defense that was a great defense. And so moving forward, obviously, I think that you have to kind of go about this in a strange way if you're Nick Saban. It's not just next man up on the depth chart, like I mentioned yesterday. You have to be able to plug guys, maybe move Dylan Moses back from that outside linebacker position and plug him in. Keith Holcomb will be on in some of the early downs, but I think you go a little bit more nickel and dime, maybe get Minkah Fitzpatrick down into the box a little bit more to be able to play that linebacker money role.
Julian Solano brings up a good point in the comment section. I don't know if we can show the video again, but the one thing that I did notice is he's doing the jump roping with with his foot in the cast. Is that dangerous right there? I mean, he's kind of got a nice little brisk pace going here. Is this dangerous? And now I'm sure he's more coordinated than I am. But the fear that he might fall over on that foot there, is there a danger here to this for Mack Wilson?
It would be dangerous for me. It would be dangerous for you. It would be dangerous for anybody in this building.
I'm falling out of my chair just sitting here.
Yeah, I think this guy's going to be okay. I think it's interesting. I mean, is his crutches just leaned up against the wall right next to him right now? When he gets done, he just hops over and grabs the crutches. I'm not sure. I'm with you. I would rather him err on the side of caution 2 days after surgery. But you know what? Some people are a little hungrier.
Yeah, some guys are just tougher than I am. At least that's probably easy to determine. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. This is AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Let's move on here. Look at item number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. The other team undefeated in the SEC. We just talked about Alabama. Let's talk about Georgia for a moment. And one of the big questions that seems to be surrounding Georgia as it moves into a tough road game against Auburn on Saturday and potentially a college football playoff appearance or an SEC championship game showdown with the Crimson Tide is, can Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm get Georgia to where it needs to go? In fact, last night on ESPN during the College Football Playoff Selection Show, Kirk Herbstreit actually asked that question very bluntly and out loud for everybody to hear. Herbstreit says, can Jake Fromm throw the ball on 3rd and 7 at Jordan-Hare consistently? That's the game at Auburn that Georgia plays on Saturday. Until they do, we have to wonder about Georgia. Now, for me, this is an incredibly frustrating conversation to continue to have, given the numbers for Fromm speak for themselves. He is 5th in the country in yards per attempt. He's nearly 10 yards per attempt. He's best in the SEC. I know what you're saying. You're smirking. You're going to compare him to Jalen Hurts. I got news for you.
Frustrating you?
I got news for you. Jake Fromm's a much better passer than Jalen Hurts is.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know if he's a better football player, but probably is a better passer. But I mean, if I lined his numbers up to Jalen Hurts, I don't think they're a ton different when you talk about the passing game. I think Jalen Hurts is sitting there at 155 passing yards per game, and Jake Fromm's at 162. I think they're both probably 75th or worse in the country. So I think listen, I don't agree with the Kirk Herbstreit. I've seen the accuracy from Jake Fromm. I saw what he could do in the Missouri game when the game plan called for him to throw. But I think it's fair for him to question Jake Fromm right now. I think he's done it with his arm, but I don't think he's faced the pass rush that can force him to be uncomfortable in the pocket yet and done it with his arm. So I think when you talk about this weekend against Auburn, that's the biggest thing to watch in the matchup. Can Auburn and Jeff Holland and Marlon Davidson in this defensive line force Jake Fromm to be uncomfortable and force him to pass under circumstances that he doesn't want to?
Raymond Cox says Fromm, 10 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say he's the reason we have 4 national championships in the last 10 years. That's a pretty bold prediction from Raymond. I love that here on AT&T SEC Country Live. That's exactly what the comment section is for. Kirby Smart's assessment of Jake Fromm, maybe a little more measured than Raymond's, but I thought he did give some good analysis of what he thought about Fromm after the South Carolina game on Saturday. Here's Coach Smart.
I thought he made good decisions with the ball. He understands where he wants to go. He understands what defenses are trying to take away. He continues to get better. He's got to continue to do that. He missed a couple things today that we thought he could have got, motion, some different adjustments, but we put a lot on the kid's plate, and he's done a good job managing that.
So listen, I won't be quite as bold as what Raymond Cox just said about 4 national championships in 10 years, but I will be bold enough to say this. If Kirk Herbstreit thinks that Jake Fromm is Georgia's biggest unanswered question, then just go ahead and give Georgia the national championship trophy right now. Because if Georgia loses, it's not going to be because of Fromm they lose. I think Fromm's more than equal to the task on Saturday. I think he's more than equal to the task at really any point this season. Georgia's got some weaknesses. I don't think Fromm is that weak.
Well, I think you also have to talk about the offensive line, which really was one of the biggest areas of concern in the wide receiving corps when we were coming into the season. I think that you had questions about what was going on with the offensive line. You had questions about what the wide receiver corps will be. So I understand what you're saying. It won't be Fromm that will be questioning next week if Georgia loses. But I think it will be the offensive line, and I think it'll be their ability to keep that pass rush off of Jake Fromm and their ability to kind of set him up on schedule on first and second down, running the ball with Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel. That's what they've been good at this year. Jake Fromm hasn't been in the situation where his back's against the wall and he's had to face the elite third down pass rushers that you're going to see for the next few weeks, or at least this weekend if you're Georgia right now. So, yeah, I agree with you. But, I think it's just the passing game as a whole that you'll be questioning Monday if they do lose.
Terrence Collins says first, I believe he means the Auburn defense, has to stop the run, then worry about rushing the passer. And I do think that's a good point that Terrence brings up. Yep. I may sound somewhat biased for saying this, but at some point, shouldn't the question be, can Jake Fromm pass if he needs to? Shouldn't the question actually evolve to, is anyone going to be able to slow down Georgia's running game? Because thus far, no one's been able to.
Well, I've been dealing with that same question about Alabama's, about Jalen Hurts for forever. I mean, this guy, he can't throw downfield. He's averaging 155 yards per game, but he's SEC Player of the Year, and he hasn't had to pass a ton. There's a strong running game, and he doesn't turn the ball over. That's what he's asked to do. Same thing Jake Fromm's asked to do. Jake Fromm's just not dual threat. And I think that's the reason a lot more people probably fall back on what Jake Fromm is right now, because it's the unknown. He is the freshman quarterback this year. The people are questioning his arm. A lot of the routes I've seen him throw this year are very simple reads, kind of that one read at the corner. Is he going to come up? Is he going to go back? Some of the cross routes, some of the flare routes out of the backfield. It is going to be interesting to see this weekend. I think Fromm can get it done. I believe in Jake Fromm. I love his accuracy. I love their offensive line against Auburn this weekend. But I don't think it's out of bounds for Herbstreit to question him.
Roderick Henderson says Fromm may get rattled, but we will help keep his composure with our running backs. That may be true. The one point, though, that you brought up that I don't completely agree with is, if Georgia loses, it's not because of the offensive line either. Georgia's reason for losing against Auburn on Saturday or any game this season is because Georgia does not have all SEC caliber defensive backs. There are a lot of units on both sides of the ball for Georgia that look pretty good right now. Offensive line is actually better than most people thought it would have been before the beginning of the season. The secondary is still, it may be average. I don't know that it's suspect necessarily, but it's not all SEC caliber. You don't have, this is not a national championship secondary. If Georgia wins at all, they're going to do so by kind of coaching and playing around this secondary a little bit. That's a much bigger unanswered question than Jake Fromm.
Well, yeah, and I understand that, and I'll kick that back in your direction. I'll say, you know what? I think Kirby Smart knows that. So I think his plan of attack when he goes in the Auburn game is probably play a little bit of keep away offense.
Okay.
Hey, let's grind the ball. Let's get 5 and 6 yards. Let's keep it out of the hands of Jarrett Stidham and Gus Malzahn and this receiving corps from Auburn, because we know maybe our secondary can be exposed. So I think that's the game plan you're going to see from Kirby Smart. Let's grind it out on the ground. Let's see if our offensive line, who is good, can wear down that defensive line from Auburn. And that's where the game will be won. Keeping it out of Jarrett Stidham's hands is going to be a big part of this weekend.
Hamp Richardson agrees with you. Auburn's going to have to stop the run to be able to win. That's probably true. Speaking of Auburn, let's make them the subject of item number 8 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And when Auburn coach Gus Malzahn met with the media this week, the final question that he faced from the media contingent was about not himself or his team, but his old boss, who's becoming his old boss because Auburn Athletic Director Jay Jacobs is going to resign soon. Well, here's what Gus Malzahn said about Jacobs and his imminent departure from Auburn University.
I appreciate Jay giving me this opportunity. He hired me. As a head coach. He's done a lot for the university and loves Auburn. And, I wish him nothing but the best moving forward.
I heard Malzahn say that this week, and the thought that came to mind for me is, we've all, I think, said that Auburn's got a wild swing it could take on the field this season. Auburn could be in the college football playoff maybe, or it could fire Gus Malzahn at the end of the season possibly. let me deal with that negative scenario for a moment. What do you think is more likely? That Auburn were to fire Malzahn, or Malzahn were to choose to leave on his own because he looks the guy that hired him no longer there, and maybe he's got some questions about the future of the Auburn athletic department, given the scandal with basketball and softball, and maybe who he thinks is going to be the next AD there. Is there a greater chance that Malzahn would leave on his own, or that someone would come in and try to push Malzahn out the door?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know the answer to that, and this is going to sound like a cop-out, but I'm going to put it right there at 50-50, which I actually think is kind of stunning in and of itself. You rarely ever do you see coaches in the SEC walk away from the job, so the fact that I'm giving it a 50% chance of it happening with Auburn and Gus Malzahn tells you kind of a lot of what I think. And a lot of me, we've talked about Jay Jacobs on the show a ton, about the debacle that's gone on within that athletic department with the softball team, with the basketball team, with the football team at times. It has been a debacle, but part of me does kind of feel bad for Jay Jacobs. I mean, he's taken this Auburn team really to new heights that they haven't seen in quite some time after he took over. He hired Gene Chizik, fired Tommy Tuberville. They won a national title, won a Heisman Trophy. They went back with Gus Malzahn after he made another move. He's a guy who was a walk-on lineman at Auburn. So there is a piece of me that feels bad for Jay Jacobs. Maybe with the change in athletic department, with the athletic director kind of leaving, maybe Gus Malzahn does see greener pastures elsewhere and maybe head back to Arkansas.
A lot of times I might try to jump on you for giving me a 50-50 answer. But in this case, I don't actually criticize you for the 50-50, and here's why. Malzahn's actually kind of in a unique category of SEC coaches in that if he were to leave Auburn this year, I believe that he's immediately employable somewhere else next season. And I don't know that Jim McElwain is right now. I mean, could an AD hold a press conference and say, here's our brand new coach, Jim McElwain, the guy that maybe just lied about some death threats at Florida?
He didn't lie, B.A.
I said maybe.
He didn't lie.
I said maybe. And listen, a lot more people agree with me on that than agree with you. But nonetheless, I said maybe. Do you think you can introduce McElwain right now, given what just happened at Florida? Could you introduce Butch Jones somewhere else next year, given everything that's going on at Tennessee? Some of it may be more serious than others. I don't know that you could do that. They may need a year's worth of break, a year's worth of time out before they come out. But another school could introduce Gus Malzahn as coach tomorrow. Maybe he's not winning enough for Auburn fans. That's fine. If Auburn fans let him go, he's a little bit like Mark Richt. He'll be coaching somewhere else tomorrow if he wants to.
I completely agree with you, and I think Auburn fans also have to be careful of what they're getting rid of in Gus Malzahn. Because we've talked about it. I still believe Gus Malzahn should be the coach at Auburn. I think he's a good enough coach to get it done in the right circumstances. If he finds the right defensive coordinator, the right people around him, I think they can get back to the national title game. I think they've got that kind of talent. I think he's recruited at a high level. I think he's developed at a high level other than some of the quarterbacks he's had through there. But they do have to be careful because this is a guy, like you said, who will land somewhere else after he is the head coach at Auburn and could possibly take off from there. You look at what Will Muschamp's done at South Carolina. I'm not sure Gus Malzahn wouldn't mirror some of that if he left Auburn. I'm not sure that he wouldn't do better at Arkansas.
The only thing, though, that I'm going to dispute about what you just said is to sort of throw something else you've said in the past back in your face, which I think is a great point. And I mean this is a great point. You've asked before, if Malzahn's not running the offense, what's his value at Auburn? Well, that to me is a legitimate question here.
Yeah, well, I think he has to rediscover himself. It's kind of what I'm pointing towards with all that. I think that Gus Malzahn needs to reinsert himself back into that offensive role. I think that he needs to take a little bit more command of his team and say, you know what? I'm the guy whose job's on the line here. It's not Chip Lindsey that's going to get fired if it doesn't work out, or maybe he will. But if I'm Gus Malzahn, I'm telling you, I'm taking the reins back over and say, you know what? This is my offense. I'm the one that I got here by running these offenses all the way from high school in Arkansas. I'm going to be the guy that takes on Georgia this weekend and calls plays.
A couple comments coming in on this. Neo Persona says the likelihood of how this ends for Malzahn all depends on this month's game, says Neo Persona. Bo Molinari, though, says probably a better chance that he gets fired. I think that's really pretty interesting. Good stuff. Keep those comments coming in our comment section. We'll continue to allow you to weigh in on all of our topics here today on AT&T SEC Country Live. For now, though, let's move on to item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And obviously a lot of the discussion around the college football world right now, kind of weighing in on what happened last night with the Playoff Selection Committee re-releasing their top 25 for the second week of this 2017 season. And there's some debate going on about some of the teams outside the SEC. One of those teams is Oklahoma, one of the best one-loss teams in the country, but a team that's a bit one-dimensional, a lot more offense than defense, and yet some analysts would say the offense is good enough that the bad defense doesn't matter. In fact, here's what David Pollack, an SEC guy, he played at Georgia, said about Oklahoma and what it'd be able to do against Alabama. Are we buying this, though, here in SEC country? Here's David Pollack.
When you look at 1 and you look at 2 and you look at 3 and you look at 4, I think all those offenses have question marks. They have legit question marks. At some point, I wonder if the committee's eyes start to go to Oklahoma's going to get 30 every week. I got news for you. Oklahoma's going to get 30 on Bama. If they play Alabama, they'll score 30 points.
Yeah, but they're giving up 40 every week.
I don't disagree, but at some point, that's the most dominant side of the ball in all of college football.
I mean, how many years are we going to do this? I mean, to me, this feels like it's been settled in the past. Think about the high-powered Oregon offense against Auburn after the 2010 season. You actually talked about that game yesterday. Think about Sam Bradford's Oklahoma team in a national championship game. Think about Colt McCoy's Texas team in a national championship game against Alabama, by the way. How many of these Big 12 or West Coast high-powered offenses are we going to see against elite SEC defenses before we realize there's a trend in place here? They don't play the same against teams that don't allow them to run the football. That's just a fact. Now, I think Oklahoma's good, and they beat Alabama in a bowl game a couple years ago. They beat Auburn last year in the Sugar Bowl, but that Auburn team is not the same as the Alabama team that Pollock's talking about that right there. I think it's asinine to assume that Oklahoma's going to score a bunch of points on an SEC elite defense the way they did against Oklahoma State last week.
Well, I agree with you to an extent. And listen, I'm not crazy enough as an Alabama guy to think that points can't be scored on Nick Saban's defense. You saw it in the last couple of years out of Clemson. You've seen it from Oklahoma before. You've seen it happen. I mean, these teams have come out and scored points. And I fall back to what Booker McFarland said in the background right now. Yeah, but you're giving up 40 points a week. So I think there has to be a balance. I think that they have a great offense. But in my opinion, like you just said, a great offense is not good enough to beat a great defense. Now, is Alabama a great defense right now? I think they're very, very good. Are they elite? I don't think it's the best unit that Nick Saban's had in quite some time. So I think that there will be obviously the difficulty when you face Oklahoma. But it's like you said, anytime we've ever seen in these big bowl games or these national championship style games, I go back to before Nick Saban even got to Alabama, in 2005, we faced Texas Tech and Mike Leach. They set every scoring record you can think of in college football. They scored 10 points against an Alabama defense that year in the bowl game. And I always fall back on that. Sometimes it just doesn't work. When you have good defensive line play like the SEC has, you can't always get it done against some of those Big 12 teams.
I'm going to run the risk here of getting into a topic that sort of takes us out of SEC country for a moment, but if you want to talk about Clemson scoring points against Alabama, which they did 2 years in a row, I'm sorry, Baker Mayfield's no Deshaun Watson.
I agree with you.
Mayfield's a good quarterback.
Yeah.
He's probably going to win the Heisman Trophy this year, at least based on kind of where it seems like it's heading right now. Mayfield's no Deshaun Watson.
I agree.
Yes, Clemson with an all-time great quarterback scored some points on Alabama. Mayfield's good. He's not an all-time great.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think when you look at listen, Oklahoma is averaging, I think, 610 yards per game right now, playing defense against Oklahoma. So, of course, you look at their film and say, man, they're dominant on the offensive side of the ball. They're scoring, they have 30 more yards per game than the second place team does. I think Oklahoma State is actually second place. I think they have like 580 yards per game. So you can look at the film, you can look at lesser defensive line, lesser opponents, lesser linebacking cores and say, man, this is really a dominant side of the ball. But I'm with you. If they do face off against an SEC team, be it Georgia or Alabama in the playoffs at some point, I think they get shut down. I don't think they get to 30 points.
Bo Molinari says Oklahoma could score a lot of points on Alabama, but they'd give up 50, and that's the issue there. I mean, I don't view Oklahoma as a legitimate national championship contender because the defense is so bad. I just don't.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I do. I think that Oklahoma, I think they probably win this weekend against TCU. Maybe they find a way to sneak in. They're going to probably have to play TCU again in a couple of weeks in the Big 12 championship game. But this is the kind of quarterback that has given Nick Saban a ton of problems. Quarterbacks not only are mobile and can move, but when they do get out of the pocket, look down the field to throw. I don't know if they have the wide receiver core to do it, and I don't know if they have the defense to beat an Alabama or a Georgia, but I do like what Baker Mayfield has done, and right now I think he's definitely the runaway Heisman favorite as well.
By the way, somebody in the comments section, let me see if I can find it. Eric Green says David Pollock's a sellout. There's absolutely no way Oklahoma puts up that many points in Alabama or Georgia. I'm going to defend Pollock here on this point, though, the idea of being a sellout because he's not supporting the SEC here. I think there's a bias in place, and I don't know if you've seen this or not. These TV people just like these high-scoring games. They just do.
Oh, they do.
There's an element in which the TV folks don't like Alabama or Georgia. Yeah. And they may not like Auburn that much either because those are teams that are going to kind of come out there. They're going to try to run the football. They're going to play good defense. And that's the recipe for winning. That's not great TV if you don't cheer for Alabama, Auburn, or Georgia. So I think Pollock here is not selling out from the SEC. I think Pollock here is falling prey to what TV likes, which are these 100-point games.
Well, and I'll also fall back in Pollock's defense. And if you go back and look at Oklahoma's schedule for the last 3 years, I think there's only probably 3 games they didn't score 30 points in. So he's going to say 30 points. I think that Oklahoma fans are sitting there going, man, we could score 60 on anybody. And so I think that Pollock probably has a little bit more of the SEC's back than you realize. There's only been really 3 or 4 games, I'm telling you. Go back and look at Oklahoma's schedule. They've scored 50 and 60 on everybody for the last 3 years. So him saying 30 points is not a big a deal as you might think.
Roderick Henderson also reminding us that Clemson only scored 14 on Auburn this year. That was a pretty good defensive showing for the Auburn Tigers, but obviously offensively not able to get that done. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. All right, can we do a quick update to quite possibly the dumbest topic we've ever had on the show? But it feels like we got to have...
That's saying something.
Yeah,
that is saying something.
It feels like we got to have a little bit of closure to this. It's the subject of item number 10 here. I guess Mississippi State's going to wear these uniforms on Saturday against Alabama. It's their tribute to the military. And yesterday we showed you this little video clip courtesy of Mississippi State and Adidas, and it kind of left Mike and I with one question. Here's the video that we saw yesterday. Take a look at this. So that's the video. We obviously like it. We think tributes to the military are a great idea. Yeah. I love the American flag in the background. I think the uniforms are cool. But the question we had yesterday was, what exactly in the uniform is a tribute to the military? It just sort of looks like the same silver and maroon that Mississippi State's been wearing for 1,000 years. Well, Mississippi State's kind of revealed some new details about these uniforms. I mean, you kind of zoom in a little closer, you see a little more. Now, I don't know what any of that's got to do with the military. I mean, you can tell me. We have another photo, though, that kind of gets in on the numbers here. All right, look on the shoulder there. There's a star that kind of comes in, and the numbers kind of have the same thing. There's like some stars and stripes kind of show up there. So I guess when you zoom in a little closer, it actually does have a little bit of a tribute to the military.
Yeah, and somebody's in the comment section right now saying there's military camo print on the jersey. I don't know.
Where is that? I'm looking at the jersey right now.
I don't know. It looks like the same jersey Texas A&M wore a couple of weeks ago that Snoop Dogg was sporting around town. I don't know. This doesn't, to me, I love the fact that, it's a military tribute. I think that everybody should do this once a year. I love what Arizona State does when they do the Pat Tillman tribute. We've talked about the Armed Forces uniforms that they wear in that big game. I love it. But to me, I don't know, man. It just falls a little bit short for me if you're going to say, military tribute.
It's a cool uniform. I love the idea of tributing the military. But is it a bad idea to wear this thing going into an Alabama game when you may lose by 30 points?
Well, listen, it's going to get a lot of airtime. Yeah, I mean, no way, one way or the other. At least you're playing at nighttime on ESPN, and a lot of people can see the uniform.
All right, coming up in just a moment, we have a really good champion of life today as we look back at one of the all-time greats who's kind of in the news today. We'll do that coming up in a moment with our champion of life. Before that, though, as we told you, AT&T, proud sponsor of SEC Country Live, AT&T, entertainment your way. Let's get ready to do our AT&T look ahead. And on Wednesdays, the day after the College Football Playoff rankings release, one of the things we enjoy doing is kind of looking at some of the top national games of the weekend, because while these don't involve SEC teams, they do certainly impact where the SEC team is going to be ranked at this time next week. So let's do that right now with our AT&T look ahead, including a game on Friday night, probably worth paying attention to. I know Washington has complained about not getting enough national attention this year. Late starts, unusual times, one of the reasons for that. Another example of that by having to play at 10:30 on Friday. But if folks watch Washington, they're going to see a pretty good team, a team that I think does belong in that conversation of top one-loss teams.
Yeah, and don't you know that Pac-12 commissioner is going to be sitting on that sideline praying to his lucky stars that somehow Washington can run the table.
Let me give the Pac-12 commissioner a little advice. Instead of worrying about Washington, Stanford, how about you get Lonzo Ball's brother out of Chinese prison? Maybe if you're going to worry about stuff, how about you see if you can get LeVar Ball's kid out of jail?
I want to be calling somebody over there, one of the dictators or whatever it is over there.
That's a different topic for a different show than this. But what if you got put in a Chinese prison?
Man, and might not be out for a month. You're going to miss some of the games. I mean, that is an absolute. That's
probably my nightmare. What do you think's happening to that Chinese prison?
That's probably my nightmare, man.
All right, honestly. Yeah, totally. Let me finish with these games right quick. Clemson plays Florida State. Clemson can win the division if it can beat the Seminoles. Notre Dame, Miami at 8 p.m. TCU at Oklahoma. These are two great national games on Saturday night.
Yeah, listen, everybody that's clamoring for a 16 playoff or an 18 playoff, buckle up because you're about to get it on Saturday night. These two teams are showing off, and both of these games are going to eliminate somebody from a college football playoff push. You just need to lock in and watch these games. A big deal for all these teams.
All right, so that's our AT&T look ahead with the games coming up this weekend. We're excited about that. Something else we're excited about here on AT&T's SEC Country Live is the way we close out our show each and every day the same way, much like Tennessee coach Butch Jones is looking for champions of life here on our program. We're looking for them too, and today it comes from the multi-time world champion Ric Flair. And I loved your tweet this morning saying you were excited about watching the 30 for 30 on DVR of Nature Boy Ric Flair last night. I didn't get a chance to see the whole thing. The truth is, I sleep like a barnyard animal. I get to bed so early. So I didn't get to watch the whole thing last night. But just as a special tribute to Ric Flair, here's a little taste of what 30 for 30 was offering on the Nature Boy last night. Take a look at this.
Wrestling's sexiest superstar, Ric Flair!
Wrestling was his love. Then it became a disease.
He got really wound up in it. He could have his fantasy world and his family on the side.
What if I told you his life was never an act?
I'm the best there is! Nature Boy!
I mean, I say this all the time, Mike. I know you know this, even though you're a good bit younger than me. The young whippersnappers that work on our show, all the people on the other side of the camera, they have no idea just how special and how much fun the Ric Flair era was. Every single one of you should do yourself a favor. Watch the 30 for 30. I don't get any money for it. I'm just telling you what I think is good entertainment, especially these young folks on the other side of this glass over here that have no idea what... Like back then, we didn't have video games and any of that stuff. All we had was Ric Flair on a Saturday night.
There just was nothing like Ric Flair and the Macho Man and Sting and those WCW guys. I'm telling you, I sound a little bit old, and obviously I watched a ton growing up. The documentary was actually a little bit sadder than I thought it was going to be. I only got about halfway through it, but I mean, that guy is an absolute living legend.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, that's Mike Johnson. Speaking of living legends, I'm Brandon Adams. Thanks for being here with us today on AT&T's SEC Country Live. Do us a favor. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Give us a rating and review there. And if you want the full audio version of the show, we try to deliver it to you in a very convenient fashion right there. Also, share this show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking about the SEC each and every day here on AT&T SEC Country Live. You all have a great day. We'll see you back here again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of AT&T SEC Country Live.